All right, welcome to today's class all about farming. We're going to go over the basics today. We're going to go over kind of a big high level overview. We'll get to some nitty gritty stuff. I appreciate Tracy Graham being on here. I might pick on her a little bit. I believe that she is a farming queen, whether or not she believes it herself. But I recognize her. I notice it. You can't go through. There's a couple different neighborhoods that you cannot go through where people don't know Tracy Graham. We're going to go over some scripts that I use while door knocking and cold calling. We're going to go over some different techniques that I've used in the past. And then I also always want to, I need to start doing this more. This farming class is based upon a couple of classes that I've taken and then sandwiched a couple of models or ideas from those different classes together to then farm a neighborhood that I used to farm. And we're going to go over some ins and outs, some do's and don'ts, and some things that I think will help you guys effectively decide whether you're going to farm or not. So let's first start off by defining farming, right? Can somebody please define farming for me? Anybody just take a stab, guess? Wait a couple seconds. Cool. So farming to me is very similar to the farming of the earth. If you're going to go ahead and farm the ground, farm the earth, are you going to do it one time, 1 year? Are you going to buy a piece of land, plant seeds in the spring, harvest in the fall, and never do it again? Great. All of you said no. You have to understand that if you choose to farm, that's a business. That's an entity. That is a lead generation source that you have to be methodical about. If you're going to farm, you need to have repetition over and over again. You need to have different mediums. If you guys know anything about farming, I love what it's called. Farming in a neighborhood is just like crops. If you're going to farm a field, do you plant corn in the field the first year, the second year, and the third year? No. You might plant corn, then you might plant soybeans, and then you might go back to corn. You see, farming, you have to understand that to effectively farm a neighborhood, you have to do different mediums, different ways of touching that neighborhood. And so that's why I said we're going to get into some dialer systems today. I don't really talk a lot of dialer systems on a lot of my trainings, but farming is very crucial to have some sort of system to call around the neighborhood. It's also crucial to understand that you have to use these different mediums. If you think that you're going to farm effectively through a postcard, I can tell you that you are going to have a big struggle and you're going to spend a lot of money. The only way to farm through a postcard is typically after you farm the neighborhood effectively for about 1 or 2 years. And we'll kind of get into that a little further down the line. But I want to give you guys an example. I moved into a neighborhood. And I started doing some market stats on it. We're going to talk about that too in a little bit here. You want to do market stats on the neighborhood. You want to make sure that the market is something that's farmable, right? You don't go up to the Rocky Mountains, buy a piece of land, and then expect to till it with all those rocks and granite boulders inside of it, right? So the ground, the earth has to be right for farming. The neighborhood has to be right for farming. You do not want to farm a neighborhood that has a 0.5% turnover. So I moved into this neighborhood. I think it's a great neighborhood to start farming. There's a decent amount of turnover. It's right in that middle range of where I like to see turnover. Too much turnover can be a little difficult because too much turnover typically means that there's a ton of investors in there. And you're only really talking to the tenants and might get some buyer leads out of it. But even then, tenants don't typically answer the door too often. People in neighborhoods that live there and owner occupy are typically the ones that you can start to build that relationship with. Because again, you're farming year over year, month over month. And so if there's a bunch of tenants in the neighborhood, you're going to make a relationship with people that are going to be moving out in 3 months. And then the next people that move in don't even answer your phone call or answer the door for the next 6 months. And it's just really hard to build a relationship. So there is, in my world, there is such thing as too much turnover. And then there's such thing as too little turnover. Okay. So I move into this neighborhood. It hits a sweet spot for me. There's about a 13% turnover ratio in that neighborhood year over year. And I lived there for a few months before I started the actual farming process. I was just doing some research. That was the mode I was still in of open houses, and I was hitting them hard. So I just didn't get started right away. But I also wanted to test the neighborhood. I wanted to walk around it. I wanted to walk my dog. I wanted to meet new neighbors. I wanted to kind of start farming it without being effective. And I started doing so. And I started noticing that once a month on Sunday, there was a flyer hand delivered to my front door. No knock, no nothing. It was just put underneath my doorstep. And then once a month, I noticed that that same agent was sending out postcards in the mail. And then I started realizing there was a second agent sending out postcards twice a month in the mail. And so there were two people that were farming this neighborhood. Now, a couple months into it, I had never received a phone call, and my information is public everywhere. I'm in real estate. Let's just be real with each other. Our information is everywhere. Typically, you can find us online or through Cole Realty, Mojo, stuff like that. We're pretty well known. No one's calling me. My door has never been knocked on. My wife was a stay-at-home mom, so she would know if people were door knocking. Once a year, I got a pumpkin. And so I started thinking about that, and I started looking at it, and I started thinking, man, well, this stinks. This is a perfect neighborhood to start farming. But man, there's two other people farming it. Like, gosh darn it, I got to find something else. But I thought, wait a second. I've always been taught in every farming class I've ever taken, you've got to use different mediums. Relationships are built belly to belly or voice to voice. And they didn't do any of that. So I looked up the stats and I started looking to see who was dominating that neighborhood. Not one of those two people that were spending a crap ton of money on their mailers and their pumpkins and their things were dominating that neighborhood. There were a couple other agents that actually I've never heard of, never seen, never sent me a flyer, that actually had more sales in that neighborhood than the people flying that or doing flyers to that neighborhood. I start talking to people. You guys know me. I don't care what brokerage you're with. I'll talk to you. I believe that we are a team with or without a brokerage name. Agents need to stick together. Good agents need to push bad agents out of this industry. And when I say push, I'm just saying we need to educate agents when they do something wrong. I have no fear around that anymore. So I start talking to some agents and I start asking around and I start thinking, hey, who's XYZ? Who's XYZ? Who's actually, oh gosh, they've been farming. There's 3 neighborhoods that they were farming for years. I'm thinking, I think if I remember right, it was like 11 years. And I still think they're farming that neighborhood to this day. And that was probably 6 years ago. But anyways, it was staggering to me that my mind went to do not farm this neighborhood because it's taken over by someone else. If I wouldn't have looked up those stats, I would have never started farming my own neighborhood. Boy, am I glad I did. We're going to get into that. And that was the game changer. You see, those 2 agents, I'll just fast forward, but those 2 agents made me look good. Do you know why? Because their flyers that they left on their doorstep on Sunday had recently sold stats. As I started making my name in the neighborhood, people thought I was dropping those flyers off. They weren't reading. I'm telling you, this flyer that they dropped off on our doorstep was not that brilliant. It was a cream colored piece of paper. I mean, it was like an off-white and it was just black and white. And I know why they did it, right? Save on cost, save on printing. I do the same thing, but I use a pastel hot yellow looking piece of paper that looks like a city notice. This thing was just, stuck underneath there. They had no presence. And it had a bunch of sold properties. And eventually their farming efforts ended up helping me because I was the one in front of people and actually talking to them. So get off this Zoom, get off this recording, stop watching it, hit pause if you're not going to be willing to do multiple different mediums when it comes to farming. If you just want to do postcards, go ahead. It's going to take you a long time. and mark my words, pretty much everybody I've ever had just do postcards ends up stopping farming because they're just not getting the return. You can do postcards effectively, that you can do what they're doing effectively if you make a name in the neighborhood your first couple of years and actually get to know the people. Then people start to see your face and they start to recognize you and they start to think, man, I haven't seen them come around. I haven't seen them maybe door knock. Then maybe you only door knock maybe twice a year or something like that. But that comes down the road, mark my words. So that's kind of your farming basics. You have to be willing to touch people in multiple different ways, and you have to be willing to set up a system, and you have to be willing to understand that that has to be a separate, full force, full energy piece of your business. And I thought my business was going to change, and it ended up not changing. I ended up farming for only a couple of years. I got a lot of business out of it, but I didn't like it. I liked open houses better because open houses, I was calling and door knocking around them anyways. And they were always different neighborhoods. I don't know why, it gave me more energy. And so that's what I chose. But I was willing to put forth the effort, and I learned a lot. And I'm going to share with you guys a lot of different tricks and tips that I've learned. I hope maybe Tracy Graham can maybe participate a little bit today, because I know she farms, and her and I have never had a dialogue about how her tactics are or what she does. So it'd be interesting to have her, validate some things I say, and it'd be interesting to have her counter or headbutt on some things. I'm all open to all types of businesses, but if you're going to farm, thanks, Tracy. If you're going to farm, you need to make sure it's one of your top two lead generation sources. It does take more time than I think a lot of us think. All right, so let's just talk about those mediums, right? So we talked about like putting out flyers. You can either door knock and hand out the flyers and have conversations. You can have a flyer and just put it underneath their doorstep or on their, their door thing. Never, ever, ever put something in somebody's mailbox. Or you can do a mailer and actually stamp something and send it out in a mail form, maybe a postcard, maybe a letter, maybe something like that. And then you can also do every door direct, EDDM, every door direct. Every door direct is a program by the United States Postal Service. And it basically means that you're going to get out something in somebody's mailbox by the postal carrier that would go in the mail to everybody in the neighborhood. And you can't single that out. So I didn't do every door direct. I did every door direct for a few times. And then what I've learned about farming is if you have a 500 person farm, you're probably really, I think even Tracy, speak on this a little bit, because I only did one neighborhood, but if you have a 500 person farm, you can probably whittle that 500 person farm down to maybe 250, 200. So that way you stop wasting time, effort, and energy on people who are just clowns.
Bruce?
Yeah.
So yes, I 100% agree. I do want to say that everyday direct mail, it's interesting. You need to be sure and put in an address. So you see what it's based on the rural carrier route. Mm-hmm. So typically it's not just going to be like that specific farm. So it's going to normally overlap into some other areas. So you want to pay attention to that. It is very cost effective. My Shred Hunger event, I'm going to be sending out to 4 rural carriers, and it's like $500 for 20, almost 2,700 contacts. So it's very effective as far as dollar wise. Yeah. As far as who you choose, I started going to the whole neighborhood, and then I've worked with my title companies to pull out the buyers, the renters that are in there. I pull out the landlords. I specifically target them with certain mailers at certain times in campaigns. And then I also do just the owner occupieds. So if I did my whole farm, I'm looking at a little over 1,200 homes. But when I narrow that down, I'm closer to about 600 which makes it much more effective. And then if I want to target something even down farther, I can use the title company to pull the people that have lived there over 10 years, say, something like that. So you can target it appropriately to use your funds more effectively. And that's key.
Yep. That's exactly what I've heard, and I ran off of myself. Usually, if you can cut the neighborhood in half, so you don't spend the dollars where they probably shouldn't be spent. Not every person deserves to have money spent on them.
Yep.
Now the counter argument. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So that's one of my top 3, right? Like Spheres Farming Open House. Anyway, so I just started it. So out of curiosity, because I don't have the budget necessarily to go crazy with all 400 homes, but I do have postcards that go out to all 400 homes. Do you think it's okay if I just am focusing on the door knocking of 200 homes and then expand from there, because and gifts and things like that? I'm just curious.
Personally, Darby, I would
For money.
Personally, Darby, I would say yes, that's a perfect thing to do. The only thing that you want to do if you're in Firestone Frederick is you want to be really careful, because in order to door knock,
You have to have that permit. Yeah.
you have to have that permit, and it is pricey. So
Yeah, I know.
you need to
Yep.
double check. Longmont is not as strict, but you do need to do that double checking, because you can burn a potential bridge, an opportunity, if you don't double check that, because the majority of people don't do it, and they
Yeah.
are calling the police on you.
Oh God, I
especially
know.
with COVID.
My neighborhood's great at that. So no, I totally get that part. No,
Yeah.
I'm just, people I know and stuff. That's kind of what I'm focusing on. So
Definitely target that, because there's different ways that you can do it, and you can make it effective with your budget.
Yeah, you know the answer to that
doubt
question.
myself. No, I just doubt myself, because I'm like, I really should reach out to all 400, but really I don't budget and time. I don't have that yet.
Well, when I say you should know that answer, what I'm saying is just in general, that question in general for all lead generation tactics. If you don't have the budget, it is more work, right? Money is something that pays for us to kind of substitute our time. If you don't have money for mailers, then you need to door knock more, right? Belly to belly, voice to voice. Money and marketing is a filler. It's not the actual lead generation source. It's a branding source. So it's just going to be more of your actions and efforts. And that's kind of where mine was. We're going to kind of go through that when I start to tell you guys about kind of my calendar of events and how it evolved over time. At first, I had plenty of time. I didn't have a bunch of real estate going on, and I had a lot of time to go belly to belly and door knock more often. Over time, start to get more business, start to do things. I don't have time for it. And so then I need to spend some more money to then cost effectively balance my time. So I lost where we were at. Why need a permit? We are not selling. Jerry, you need to look up your city municipalities. Yeah, they don't care. If you're door knocking, it doesn't mean you're soliciting. It means that you're disturbing the neighborhood, and you need to make and then the city and county want control over who's disturbing the neighborhood. So that's a great question, but that's for the city, and I'll tell you, you're gonna get a big no. I've had open house signs taken from Frederick cops. I won't do an open house in Frederick. I'm tainted, and I won't get the permit. So I guess what I was going to go back into is you don't need to farm the neighborhood you live in. A lot of us choose to farm that neighborhood without doing stats. In order to farm, you need to make sure that that soil is ripe for farming. Now, I've been told that a turnover rate between probably 8 and 20% is a good range. Anything over that, you typically have a lot of tenants. Now, there's ways that you can target tenants, and there's ways that you can target the property owners, like Tracy said. You get a little deep with it, right? You got to go meet with a title rep. You got to pull some information, and you got to do your work. You got to go through that neighborhood and understand who is and who isn't, and then put them on a separate campaign for touches. And understand that with a, non-owner occupied person, so the owner of the property, but maybe they're renting it out, it's going to be really hard to get belly to belly with them because they're not going to be at the doorstep when you knock. So there's a lot of digging for phone numbers and calling those types of people. Tenants, on the other hand, receive your mailer, may receive all of that stuff, but they're kind of in that place where this isn't my neighborhood. I'm just renting. I don't need to answer the door every time this guy comes around. And so there's some balance to it, right? And then on the flip side of it, you don't really want some sort of, neighborhood that has the 30, 40 year people in it that are staying in there for 30 to 40 years, and there's only a 1% turnover. You're going to be really working hard to get that listing. So when you do it, how do you do that, right? So let's dive in. I typically will go to Iris, or you can sit down with a title company and figure out how to get these stats on different neighborhoods. But if you go into search, listing search, and hey guys, holler at me if I'm not recording my screen. I'm sitting here thinking you guys are following me. Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
I know. Okay.
So I go into Iris, I go into listing search, go to residential detached. I like to see actives, backups, pendings, and solds. I just want to see what's out there. There's not a lot of listings out there, and there's not probably a lot of listings, and there's probably not a lot of actives and pendings, but I do want to see that. Sold, I would go back a full year. And then I don't really use any other parameters, I guess, but I want to see.
Bruce, I will say, if you're just starting to farm, I would go back farther than a year, just because last year was a bit of an anomaly.
That's a very good point. Actually, that's a really good point. And I was actually going to say, what I do is I do like this year, I go 3 years back typically. And that's a really good point about COVID. I personally don't know if I would even use this year.
Right.
I might skip this year and then go 3 years prior. But that's a good point. I'll just show you guys for an example here. Let's just say, I'm just going to use this guy. I believe this is a decent term. So let's say I'm just going to farm this quadrant here. Or maybe I'm just going to farm this quadrant. The key is the bigger the pool, the more effort you're going to have to put into it. And that's why I said, if you're going to do this, do it effectively. I would choose like Tracy had 1,200 homes to get down to 600. So let's just see what this guy has. $44. And looks like there are 4 actives and about 5 pending. No, 6, 7, 8, 9 pending. So 10 active or pending. There's a lot of movement in that neighborhood so far. And then if there's 44 homes minus 10, there's 34 homes that have sold in the last year in that neighborhood. Now, how do you figure out how many homes are in that neighborhood? That's when I use Cold Realty Resource. What I would do is I would go into, I need to find the street name. You guys all have access to Cold Realty Resource. That's my gift to you guys. If you guys need the login and username for that, that's the dialer system. It's not a dialer system. It's an information system to pull names and phone numbers and email addresses. Everybody in the PC program has access to that. You just need to send me a personal email, and then we can have a chat about it. So I won't get in the nitty gritty with that, but this is how I find out how many homes are in this neighborhood. So I need a street, K Street. That looks perfect. No. Dang it. The system is definitely touchy. Less is more in most cases. I might have to find an actual specific property. Okay, so if you guys need to learn how to roost cold, just make sure you don't go into, different cities if you're trying to find it. So here's Longmont. I'm probably just going to click on someone. You just want to get a name going and then go to radius search. Oh crap, no, it's map search. Map search. And so if you'll notice, this is not pulling the neighborhood that I chose because there's two different K streets. So just scroll up, find that area that this is the quadrant that I was looking at. And then you hit freeform plotting. And then you can draw a map, view available prospects. And it's coming up with 1,096 records. See that? So 1,096, so take 34 divided by 1,096. And I come up with 3%. Now, like Tracy said, it's a little different. It's a little bit of an anomaly. So what I would do, and I'm not going to do it for the sake of time in this video, but what I would do is I'd change the search parameter over here, and I would go with a listing date of, and I might even just start, let's say, January 1 to January 1, 2021, or even back further. Does that make sense? Am I bouncing around too much? You need to make sure you go through and find the right place. So let's see what, oops. Let's just see what it gives us. There we go. So a little different now, all right? There's now 87 properties that sold in 1 year. So like Tracy said, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Tracy. 87 divided by 1096 is now 7.9%. So now it's fallen in that cusp of things that I like. I would venture to say, because I know this neighborhood very well, that if you did multiple years of market research and stats on it, you're going to find that that's a decent neighborhood to farm. It usually, the last time I looked at that neighborhood, because I was actually close to, when I was on the team that I was on, I was close to having another agent farm that neighborhood. That's why I use it for the example. But if you go back multiple different years, it comes out to be anywhere between, I think, 7% and I think up to 2%. Great neighborhood. The other thing that you got to understand is that when we say 8 to 20%, these last couple of years have been a very, very tight market with very, very low inventory. So sometimes your 8 to 10% home or neighborhoods in a typical market may be more like a 15 to 20% turnover ratio. Mm-hmm. It may be the time to get in there and start farming it over these next couple of years. And as the market maybe continues to elevate, you can educate people on that. Maybe at levels, you can continue to educate people on that. But listings are very few and far in between right now. So we're going to see lower percentages, right? Makes sense. So do your research, find those neighborhoods, then, do another research, go walk the neighborhood. You don't have to door knock it, but go walk it, right? The last thing you want to do is find a great percentage neighborhood, get all of this marketing materials ready, for that subdivision and print this off and schedule this and do that. And then you go walk the neighborhood and you just don't feel safe. You go walk the neighborhood and it is not what you thought, right? So go walk the neighborhood, do your due diligence. This is a lead generation source. It's never going to be your first lead generation source, right? Your sphere of influence has to be your first. But if it's going to be your second, you got to put time and effort into it for sure. You guys know why I keep stressing that? because I trust me, I get a lot of people that call me and say, hey, Bruce, I've been farming my neighborhood and I'm not really getting any results. And 99% of the time, it's because of their infrequentness and their lack of belly to belly or voice to voice. Those are the two main things.
I'd like to add 2 things, Bruce, if that's okay. So, okay, sorry. So when you're doing that research, I just want to emphasize, you want to go back 3 years. That's what I recommend, a minimum of 3 years. Do it year by year so you can tell what you're looking at as a whole to get the trend. Also, by doing that, you can analyze and see, like what Bruce said, if you don't live in the neighborhood. I personally don't like to farm my own neighborhood because I don't like people breathing down my throat if I'm out gardening and I have a listing, you know, I don't want them bothering me personally. But if you go back 3 years, you're going to see if there's an agent that has been farming that neighborhood. That's not to say that you don't have that opportunity, because I believe there's enough for everybody if you choose the right neighborhood. And when you're farming, once you get going, if you should be targeting 30% closings out of that neighborhood once you get it going. If you are not consistent, that's going to be your biggest downfall, because as Bruce said, consistency, you need to stay in front of them. And when you first start out farming, you may want to do stuff like I took a break from farming and then I got back into it and I set it up on a campaign. So every 3 weeks they were getting a postcard. I was dropping something off. I was giving them a gift. I was doing door knocking. So it was very, very consistent. And they're like, oh my goodness. And then once you get going, a great thing to do, or even if you haven't farmed the neighborhood, but you've done a lot of business in the community, is create your own postcard with a map, just like Google Maps, and put little pinpoints of the homes that you've sold. In my neighborhoods, I've sold 34 homes. And that really stands out. Or even if it's just in the community, as you build that, that makes a huge difference.
%100. Awesome. Thanks for being on here. I got to tell you that again.
Yeah.
This is everything that you're saying is all on my outline, and I am just not 100% today. And so I appreciate you kind of reiterating some things. So in Iris, we did that map search. There's 87 homes that sold that year. Here's all the brokerages and offices that sold it. So I'm going to try and find, okay, who's dominating? Right off the rip, I'm not seeing any brokerage that is dominating. Coldwell Banker has a decent chunk. ERA, decent, smaller chunk, but there's a chunk. Equity, smaller chunk. Keller Williams, decent chunk. Some miscellaneous, one-off brokerages. You got Remax with a larger chunk. Remax Tradition with well, actually, there's all sorts of Remaxes in here. You got Remax Lafayette, Longmont, Loveland, DTC, Traditions, Boulder. So at first glance, it looks like Remax is dominating it, but there's so many different, Remax brokerages in there. Probably the same thing. I really looked at Keller Williams. There's 4 of our First Realty and Associates here in Longmont, and there's 2. There's 1 in Fort Collins, and then there's the 1 in Loveland. So what I'm looking for is somebody that has a huge trend. So I might take a second and look at, okay, Remax of Longmont. Let's go into these. Now, if you notice in Iris, I'm at 54. I'm at 54 of 87. So I'm just going to quickly scroll down here. Diane Stowe, Kathy Crowder, Kit Magley. I know all 3 of them. Tracy Easy. Diane Stowe, Natasha Hubbard. I know every single one of these people. Chris Ramprone. So I've seen Diane Stowe a couple different times. I also know she's a big agent in the neighborhood or in the just in Longmont in general. Been doing this for a while. Ken Kenemoto, big agent. Jill, and I'm probably past that same brokerage, right? Josh Landers. So I'm not seeing a consistent pattern, but you need to do your due diligence. You need to look for that, right? And as you're door knocking, maybe even start to ask, is anybody else coming around here and doing this? I usually don't like to talk about other agents, but if you want to, you can. I've heard of people doing that. But does that make sense? You really want to see if anybody's dominating that neighborhood. You really want to make sure you do your market stats on it. And then, like Tracy said, go back multiple years, right? If you're going to get 8% one year, 14% the next year, and then 11% the next year, your average is around 11%, right? So do those averages. Make sure you find it. Make sure you see it. Look at who's dominating what each year. All of the above. And Tracy hit the nail on the head. You got to use different mediums, and we're going to get to that here in a second. Submit chat. So we've got our neighborhood, right? We've got our neighborhood. Now we want to do this. How do we do this? I personally am a big calendar guy. I'm a very electronic person, but when I do business planning, I'm very paper oriented. And so what I typically do is, you guys seen those huge, tripod, those huge tripod things with a big piece of notebooks or a big sheet of paper on it. That's what I like to use. It's a big visual for me. It helps me. You got to find you. But what I'll do is I'll put January, February, March, April, May, all the way to December, all the way down that thing. And then I'll put a line where the quarters are. So that way I know, kind of where the breaks are in the year. Tracy, how many events do you do for your farm each year?
Typically I do 2 to 3 events, but then I'm big on events for the community. Like, for example, I have my Shred Hunger event coming up. And with that, I make sure in Target, you can't send out a mailer to the whole community because that's just too expensive. But I definitely target my sphere with those, and I target my farms, because that's another way, even though it isn't specifically for their neighborhood, they see you out in the community giving back, and that's key. So as far as the events, that is important. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but the other thing, if you're going to give a gift, give something that has longevity. If you're given just a gift, yes, it doesn't matter. If you don't have something that has some stickiness to it, that is longevity, as far as like what Bruce just showed, a calendar, that is an example. Or
what's sticky? Sticky. I don't want to put some sticky on their door. They get pissed off at me. What do you mean by sticky?
No, sticky as far as sticky that is of value to them, that they're not. When you do a newsletter, I'm going to be perfectly frank with you, or a postcard, you have about 10 to 15 seconds that they're going to read it from the post office to or from their mailbox to the trash. Okay. That's what happens. For a long time, hand delivered everything and hardly did any mailers unless it was a just sold, just listed type postcard in those farms. However, at the point in time that I get discouraged, I run across somebody, I walk by, I had been doing this neighborhood at this point in time for 10 years. I walk by and a gentleman pops out of his garage and says, "Oh my gosh, Tracy Graham, how are you? What's going on? I need you to come into my garage for a minute." I go into the garage. This isn't typical, but he has stacks of my newsletters. I missed a month, and he's like, "Are you okay? You missed a month. What happened? I can tell by our whole neighborhood what's going on, and you keep me informed, and I so appreciate it." So there's points and times that you may get discouraged, but having the consistency will pay off. And even though you don't feel like you're making a difference, potentially you are, because on the majority of my appointments, I have zero competition when I go to those listing appointments.
That's why farming is beautiful. Yep. Stickiness. I love that. Stickiness for me, I call it guilt gives. Guilt gives.
Mhm.
They feel guilty throwing it away. Here's one of the best guilt gives I do, and I got this off of Damian Wise. This is his. I've had this for years. I share this with every single farming class and Ignite classes. A guilt give, she said calendar. It's similar to a calendar. This one isn't even half a year related. So a lot of calendars are for the year. A lot of, Broncos schedules, Rocky schedules are for that season. This is a kitchen conversion magnet. Goes right on their fridge, and it's a guilt give. Even if they don't give a crap about these kitchen conversions, it's still kind of that cool thing to go, yeah, there might be a time that I need to understand how many cups are in a pint. There might be some times my brain lapses, and this thing goes on the refrigerator and it doesn't get taken off because there's no reason to take it off. Stickiness, guilt give.
Another really good guilt give, as you called it, or sticky give, is if you are able to create something that has local phone numbers on it, like the non-emergency number for the police department, the power, even maybe their HOA phone number, some of those things that are quick and easy, the people don't throw those away either.
Yep. That's another great one. Emergency contact list. Yep. And even on an emergency contact list, like, you can put some of your vendors on there.
Yeah.
Right. And that helps with that too. Your vendors appreciate it. Share it with them. Make sure they're, get permission, because it's a touch. Like, they're not going to give you permission, but at least now you planted that in their head that you're thinking about them. It's great. It's perfect.
One other thing, if you do that and you put some of your contacts on it, they may contribute some finances to that.
That's a good point too. They may be a sponsor for it. Great. Okay, so we've got our calendar, right? Now I'm going to start to think, okay, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? Remember, it's the consistency and the frequency. So I'm just going to spitball here. But for me, I don't want to send out something. If I'm first starting ground zero, day one, personally, I'm probably choosing door knocking. So I choose January, door knocking. February, cold call. March, mailer. Then maybe an event in April, and I'm probably going to door knock for that event. And then I might cold call, and then I'm going to flyer again. That's just an easy method, right? Door knocking, calling, mailer, and then mix in some events. But I'm going to look through that calendar, and I'm going to do that methodically. And like I said, my thought process is to be very methodical about it. I want to, personally, my business wants to door knock first. That way, when I call, I can say, hey, I'm not sure if we met at your front porch or not, but I was a gentleman door knocking in January around your neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. It helps me get in the conversation. Same thing when I go to flyer at the third month of the quarter. I go door knocking, hey, just want to make sure you get my flyers. You want to make sure, blah, 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 blah. Right? There's all sorts of different scripts. We're not going to get into too many of the different scripts. We'll get more into the tangibles and, what is on our postcards? What am I door knocking with? What am I cold calling around and for? Don't you do something every year around October, Tracy?
I used to do pumpkins. I would rent a U-Haul. It's gotten a little more complicated, so I've stopped doing that. And unfortunately, I got some very weird responses towards the end. But there's other things you can do. Like, when I first started, I didn't have any money. So I did things that were corny. I'm kind of a silly person if you actually get to know me, bit of a goofball. So I went out and bought, the shelf liners that are kind of spongy, and I cut out circles for round tuits, when you open a jar. And with the flyers, when I was going around, I would put around to it in my key people, those owner occupieds that at that point in time, I wanted people that had lived there at least 5 years. So I did a little round to it and put a little tag on it and said, hey, when you get round 2 selling your house, give me a call. I gave wrapping paper. I got little 50-cent rolls of wrapping paper at Christmas. And I said, in the new year, if you're looking to sell your home, I'd love to wrap it all up for you, different sorts of things like that were very inexpensive. Sometimes I would only do, a certain area 1 month and then the next area the next month. But those things, people are like, oh yeah, you gave me a pumpkin or you gave me wrapping paper for a garage sale that the HOA was doing. I get 100 burritos and I go around and I give burritos. I have to tell you, there's one particular gentleman I can think of. I gave him a burrito 5 years ago and he called me. He goes, I don't know if you remember, but you dropped off a burrito at my door and we were in the middle of garage sale and we were so hungry. And he's like, I just always said from that time forward, I'm going to call Tracy if I need to do something real estate or if I know somebody. So do little things. They make a huge impact. It doesn't have to be expensive. Break it up into smaller chunks if you don't have a lot of money, or make it yourself.
Bingo. Yeah. Do not spend a ton of money.
Nope.
You got to whittle that neighborhood down and then maybe start to spend a little bit of money on it. I like what you said there. So once you have your plan of attack, always be on the lookout for another opportunity. And she did that with the garage sale days, right? You don't really want to put garage sale days into your calendar of events because what if the HOA doesn't have it that year? What if this, what if that, right? But always be watching that neighborhood. Some people will create a Facebook page for the neighborhood and basically on their flyers, they will always have a link to that Facebook page. And they'll monitor it and they'll do those different things for it. You go to their events. Sometimes the HOA puts on different events. Do that, go to it, wear your name tag, contribute to it, help out, volunteer, put on your own events. But I usually do a calendar of events of things that I'm going to do, door knock, cold call, and put out a mailer. But I'm going to intertwine those events and those different things in there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we talk about whittling down the neighborhood, right? It's kind of wild and you get used to it. It's kind of wild. If you do it methodically, you can really remember houses that I won't door knock on again. The way that I started off doing that, and there's multiple different ways you can do it. I'm the guy I'm going to take the easy way on stuff like clerical. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in. So I already got this ready for you while Tracy was talking. So here's our neighborhood that we were looking at. And then I jump into Google and I zoom in until the houses pop up. And so the first time I'm out door knocking, I might start at Steel Street. And as I'm going down here, I'm kind of checking off these houses and I'm putting little things on it. So if the first house doesn't knock, or if I knock on the door and they don't answer, I might put a circle on that house. I'm just making up a code right now. And then if the second house opens up their door and curses me out and tells me to never come back, blah, 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 I'm going to put probably an X on that house. And then the next house, we'll shut my door if I'm loud. The office loves me, you guys. I'm the loudest person in here. I'm going to put an X on that house. And then the third house, if I have a great conversation, I might put a star on it. And then before you know it, you've got, and I'm probably like, so if you do, gosh, what is it? Command Shift F4. Anyways, if you're on a Mac or Windows, there's a way that you can basically do a screenshot of just an area. And so I would just draw, I can't do it. I would just draw the area right here. And then you take it to like Microsoft Word or something like that and print it off. And it's nice and big and it's there. And then I would do the same thing for this section. And so as I'm door knocking the first time, it's like I said, if you're gonna farm, put the effort in, quit copying out. I get plenty of phone calls that says, I've been doing this for a long time and I'm missing something. The details is what you're missing usually. It takes a long time to door knock through this entire neighborhood. There's 1,096 homes. Don't convince yourself that you're going to get through that neighborhood in 1 day or 2 days. How many days do you think this would take you to get through, Tracy?
I would probably, I mean, realistically, in chunks, I'd say 2 weeks.
Thank you.
I mean, because I don't, you have to make it digestible. If you set a goal for yourself that is not attainable, you're just setting yourself up for defeat and frustration. So you need to make it small, manageable bites so you can continue with what else you need to do in your day, but you can be effective on it.
Yep. And so I'm going through here, and then the next time I go door knocking, I'm not knocking on number 2's door. And by the time you get into it took me about, I'd say 6 to 8 months before I could get I had a 500 doorstep neighborhood, and I could get it down to about 350. And then over time is when you really get it down into about that half. But I'd say 6 to 8 months in, I clearly knew who I should waste my time on and who I shouldn't. But you got to be methodical, and then you got to save that map, and then you got to bring it out there. One time I lost my map. I was so every time I go out with a map, I would go out with my first map that I went with, and then I'd have a second map, because sometimes the first people that you think you had a great conversation with were just appeasing you because they never thought they'd see you again. And then you knock on their door and you're like, all right, look, buddy, I'm not going to answer the door every time you open up this door, like, get off my steps. And now they're an X instead of a star. So always have another map. But that's my techniques. I don't know if everybody walks around with a map, but I liked to make sure that where I was spending my money wasn't on the people that were cursing me out.
Amen.
Just like you guys starting in business, I always tell you guys, it takes 1 to 2 years to effectively brand yourself as a real estate agent in this business to your friends, family, and confidants. It takes 1 to 2 years of doing something in a farm methodically before you are Tracy Graham, who gets a phone call that says, hey, 5 years ago, you gave me a breakfast burrito. It takes time. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes energy.
And consistency.
Yes.
Consistency is the key word.
And just like that guy, I'm telling you, that guy's a little eccentric, but mark my words, there are plenty of other people in her neighborhood that she farms that also noticed she missed a month. I noticed when the agent didn't flyer my doorstep on Sundays. Never got a knock on the door, but I would notice if it was a Sunday and I didn't have a flyer underneath my mat. They do notice, and I never called her up to tell her. I never met her because she never door knocked, but I knew when she didn't do it, and there's other people that notice that too. And if you start to be inconsistent with it, all your efforts are lost. It's incredible how fast they're lost. Let me go back to my McDonald's analogy. Every person in this Zoom room and every person that's going to listen to this, because we live in a country with technology, has heard of McDonald's. I don't care if you've ever ate there or not. Every single person in this world, unless you do not have technology, has heard of McDonald's. And McDonald's, what do they still do? McDonald's still is the #1 spending of marketing for their brand every single year. They're consistent with it because they know for a fact that if they stop branding themselves today, it's a matter of 3 to 4 years before they go under. So the consistency is, it has to be done. And if it's not going to be done, you're wasting your time, effort, and energy. You got to brand yourself. Questions? All right, let's get into the last topic that I have on my outline is what. Right, we like to do a who, what, where, when, and why. That's, if you guys watch my outlines, that's kind of what I roll into. So we talked about a couple of items of what, here's the guilt give or the stickiness. That thing, that's a magnet. If I were to have the company mail that magnet, it costs about $2. If I have them ship me all of the magnets in a box and I go door knock, it costs me about 37 cents a piece if I order a lot of them. And I'm not just using those magnets for just this farm. I'm using it for my sphere. Any guilt gives that are not specific to one area or person or demographic, I'm getting a boatload of them typically. Because if I can get 1,000 for 37 cents a piece, or I can get 200 for 57 cents a piece, it's a no-brainer for me, right? I'm not going to stop in this business, and I'm always going to have them. And I'll tell you what, kitchen conversions, they haven't changed since I was born. So what do you say? What do you do? What do you give? How do you do it? Right? So if I'm door knocking, I like to have something of value, a guilt give or something. I don't typically door knock with stats. Stats usually are when I send out some sort of mailer. Now, there's all sorts of takes on this. A lot of people door knock with stats. I've learned that for me, I have a better effective conversation if I don't have real estate stuff with me. I like one of the things that I still use to this day. Well, not after I start coaching, but you go to the Dollar Tree, and at the Dollar Tree, there are two items that I used to buy. I used to buy the Betty Crocker pizza cutter, and I used to buy the Betty Crocker pie scoop or spatula or whatever you want to call it. With the pizza cutter, there's a little tagline I put on there. It said, "No matter how you slice it, I appreciate your business." And then on the pie thing, I forget what my tagline was. No matter how you serve, I don't know. But if you go on Pinterest, just look up pop by gifts in real estate. And that's where I got those two ideas. And I would have a bag full of about 100 of them. And I would go door knock that neighborhood and leave pizza cutters on people's doorsteps and knock on their door. Yeah, they're $1 a piece. So if you have a 500 unit neighborhood, I need to get that neighborhood down to about 250 doorsteps. So I'm not spending $250 where it doesn't deserve, right? You start to spend money down that road. Now these 37 cent a piece things, yeah, I'm probably going to go door knock when I first start farming and give everybody those, right? Unless somebody tells me to get off their doorstep. So start off smaller and then graduate up. The pizza cutters were a huge thing in my neighborhood. People thought it was the corniest damn thing I've ever done. And it was the corniest thing I've ever done. Here I am, I gotta really work on my cussing on these things. I'm a grown boy and I'm giving out pizza cutters that say, no matter which way you slice it, I appreciate your referrals. I appreciate your business. It's corny, but I think the corniness leaves an impression.
The corniness by itself has stickiness.
Yes. Yeah, they remember because you laugh about it. You joke about it. You wouldn't believe how many times I was a little nervous to give, you get this bearded, tatted up guy on the other end of that door, opening the door going, "What do you want?" And I'm going, "Hey, how you doing, man? You need a pizza cutter?" Like, it feels weird and awkward sometimes, but they remember you for it. And you guys know me. My biggest mantra is attack the elephant. So I just say, "Hey, look, man, this is kind of corny. Here's a pizza cutter because I want you to remember me. I'm a real estate agent in your neighborhood. My name's Bruce. We've never met. Here's a pizza cutter. It's a little weird. I get it. Do whatever you want with it, but I appreciate your business." And then they say, "Well, your business? What do you mean?" No, I appreciate your business. I'm in real estate, and there's a lot of things happening in this neighborhood, and I just appreciate it. Do you have any questions about what's going on? Now, when I'm door knocking, I don't look for people selling their homes. If they're going to sell their home, they're going to bring it up to me because I'm bringing up real estate. One of my number one scripts was, "Hey, what's going on? I'm canvassing your neighborhood today because I know that you have people in your life who are looking or making lifestyle changes to make moves in real estate. I don't want to sell your house. I just want to know if you have friends that might be looking to buy a home in this area, or anybody in Longmont that's looking to sell a home. I want those people to stay put. I do not want to sell my farm's homes, but I do, right? But my mantra is coming off that I don't. Those 34 homes that Tracy sold, she now, I can't say you lost the relationships, Tracy, but you lost that relationship in the farm. And now the
Right.
buyers that came in to buy that house, they had an agent, most likely, right? 9 out of 10 times, they had an agent. And as it's fresh, they would continue to refer that agent. So now Tracy's got to infiltrate 34 new people as she goes.
But we all adopt the buyers for our listings, or the sellers, we adopt them and we carry on and start building that relationship as well.
Yes, that's an orphan campaign. So she's kind of doing like a hybrid, right? She's going to continue to farm. It doesn't matter if they use another agent to buy that house. I've had people where we've sent mailers to for months and months and months and months and months and months. And then they want to do something in real estate. And because our name, Damian and I's name, we're constantly in front of them. A couple people thought they bought the house with us.
Yes.
It's wild. So don't not knock on their door. I'm just saying, my mantra is, I don't want you to move, but I also do want you to move because I love listings. And that's why I'm actually out here. Right. So typically for me, if I'm door knocking, I like to have something tangible to give them. I don't always spend money on it, you guys. I don't, you go around with kitchen conversions once, you don't do it twice a year. You go around with pizza cutters once, you don't do it twice a year. So sometimes I door knock with some stats, but typically it was a mailer. Sometimes if I door knock, I might have something that is like a new recipe. So it's getting to be, the fall season. I love to drop off things with different chili recipes. In the spring, some people take around seed packets. You can get seed packets for 10 cents a piece, and you go around and you knock on the door and you give them seed packets with a little tagline that says, spring is here and spring is sprung and listings will too, or something like that. There's taglines all over the internet. If you type in pop by gifts for real into Google, you'll find plenty of different options. So that's typically what I like to do when I door knock. When I call, I like to talk about a recently sold piece of inventory or something that has just hit the market. When I flyer, I like to do things that showed basically stats. That was kind of my mantra, and then I intertwined events in there. Whew. That is all I have for my outline, and I am dying. Tracy, do you have anything to wrap up with? Harry, anything to wrap up with, or anybody else?
Nope. I think you covered it. No, I was good.
I think for everybody, I'm just starting in farming. I've only done it since July now. It is a very long-term game. And start off slow and at your pace, because you'll burn out really quick. So financially, I had to do little bits until I could do.
Yeah. One of the things that Rod Fishkin taught me was never have a farm bigger than 500. So if you had a neighborhood that you want to own and it's 1,000 divided into two and call 1-1 and 1-2. In other words, farm 1, farm 2, so that you can keep them distinguished and it's not such a big number.
Yeah. But you got to do what you can. So I don't have a huge budget. I'm going to be honest. I don't. So for my first pop by, I did a thing. Hey, just popping by to introduce myself. I live in the neighborhood, and my pop by was popcorn and pop rocks because I was popping by. And I came up with a cute little flyer. I printed it myself. I attached it to a sandwich bag. It wasn't much, but it's what I could do. So
That's perfect. You shouldn't spend a lot of money when you haven't made a lot of money.
Exactly.
You wouldn't
Yep.
believe how many times I door knocked with a pocket full of business cards. And my script was,
Mhm.
hey, what's going on? I don't
Yeah.
have any agenda today. I just wanted to see if anybody in your neighborhood had questions about real estate. You see, no one's walking in my office. So I figured I'd come to the neighborhood.
Springtime, those little flowers that you can buy, I think my first time I paid, oh my gosh, hardly anything for them. Less than a nickel. I can't remember. It's like 3 cents. Somebody gave them to me for 3 cents. And I just handed them out with my business card. I stapled it to my business card.
Mhm.
They don't have to grow. Go at the end of the season and grab a bunch of packets and then do it next year.
And farming was something that took me 3 years. I've always wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it my first 3 years. I knew I wasn't going to be consistent.
Yeah.
Because I was too focused on my sphere and too focused on open houses because those were my free legion, and I knew farming was going to take a little bit of an investment. So because other people are doing it and it's worked for them for 10 years, you guys. When she said 10 years, I was like, okay, well, in 10 years, I could say I sold 35 homes in that neighborhood, but it may take 10 years.
I mean,
Yeah.
on July 4th, I wanted to buy these big flags, right, and put them out, but I knew I didn't have the money. So I cut it in half and bought the littler ones. And guess what? I still had 1,000 flags out. Took me forever. But hey, at the end of the day, it looked kind of cool when you look down the street and saw these little flags. But the point was, I still got my name out there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's end with some housekeeping items. That's a really good point. When you are door knocking or cold calling, make sure if you're using a dialer system, you're not calling the do not call list. When you are door knocking, all right, do not stake flags in someone's yard. Do not put flyers in their mailbox. I'd really be careful, and I know some people still do. I wouldn't tape a flyer to someone's door.
Mm-mm.
All right. Be very careful and conscious and kind of over the top when it comes to door knocking. Walk on the sidewalks, not on their grass. Do not put something in their yard. Roll it up, put it in the door handle, roll it up or put it underneath the doormat, something like that. I went door knocking with a guy one time, and all of my information is on the flyer. We spread off. This was before I did, I used to do leapfrog with people or back to back, but this is before that. So we spread it off. And before I know it, my phone is blowing up. And in the middle of door knocking and in the middle of my lead generation, I don't answer the phone. But this number kept calling me like 3 and 4 times. And it was because the gentleman that I was door knocking with, I forgot to say, do not put it in their mailbox. We happen to be door knocking in an older neighborhood. And the mailboxes were right at the front door, right? And he kept putting flyers in those mailboxes, and the post office got like 3 or 4 calls, and guess whose information was on it? It was mine. So just be careful with that. Be diligent, right? Not everybody. I'm telling you, I have been cursed out I don't know how many times about America because I had an American flag, and how dare I expect that everybody's house I'd knock on their door to then celebrate the 4th of July.
Had one out of 1,000.
The other
Right,
thing
and I don't really care, but as long as I don't put it up for them to display like in their yard, that's where you get in big trouble.
The other thing I want to mention is if you are, dropping a flyer off at someone, please remember most homes have cameras now. So watch what you're saying if you're on the phone. Watch what you're doing because they're watching you.
Yep.
You know what I do? If I love seeing Ring doorbells and stuff like that, I will act like I don't see it, and then I'll compliment something on their front porch or their yard or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, I love these 2 paint colors. That's pretty cool. Man, they keep a tidy yard. Man, I love these big boulders. That aspen tree looks very cool, well kept. Man, that 3-car garage looks massive. That'd be so cool to have. Compliment them, whatever you can figure out and say. Okay, I'm gonna get off here. Go hack up a lung. Anything else?
I just want to throw out, if anybody has any questions about farming, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to help.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank
See you guys.
I probably will. Bye.